Hey Bulldogs, this is the first video of our next unit, which is begins with the Renaissance. The unit's more than the Renaissance, but that's a big chunk of it. I just started making this video and I want to set them at 10 minutes and I was only halfway through because I love this stuff so much and I think you are too. And I was just talking so much about it. So I'm going to try to be more brief this time, but feel free, please, once we're in class, ask me questions about it. Let's go over this more. There's so many cool things to learn here. Okay, so I'm probably not going to get into patronage right now, but what I want you to know right now is that patrons paid for the art. Patrons were wealthy, patrons had power, and art was used to show that off. So that's how a lot of this art was commissioned. And we can talk about Isabella d'Este as well. So the first thing I want you to see is that there are 7 characteristics of Renaissance art that we're going to look at. We're just going to look at Italian art today. We're going to look at northern Italian art, not northern Italian, northern Renaissance art later, like northern Europe. Okay. Also, a little disclaimer: Renaissance artists painted and sculptured people that were not wearing clothes. Okay, we're going to be mature here. We're only going to show it in an appropriate manner. But if you're going to study art of the time, there's no way to avoid that. So the first characteristic is realism and expression. They wanted things to look real. Like, can we make this art look like a photograph? And they wanted people to have feelings. They were not going to just like create robots, right? People have different emotions and that should be reflected in art. So as you can see here, this is made in 1427 by Masaccio. This is Expulsion from the Garden. So this is Adam and Eve. And you can see Adam and Eve are not too happy here. They are feeling sad. They are feeling miserable, right? But during medieval times, if they did Adam and Eve, like on a mosaic here, how are they feeling? I don't know. Maybe they're happy. They look a little pensive. They look a little blah. They look a little bit like cartoonish. Not a lot of realism going on here, right? So like, they don't look like they're in quite as much agony as the Renaissance. So that's a big difference. Okay, so it's always important to see if there's a change. Well, what did it look like before? So here's the before, there's the after, before. All right, now we have perspective. That's the second characteristic. I bet you covered perspective in middle school, maybe even elementary school art. So I don't want to get too much into this, but you know what perspective means, right? Oh, yeah, they're using geometry. They're using math, right? They're using math in their art. Things look like they're in the front, they're in the back, right? It gives it that 3D effect. This is also by Masaccio, also in 1427. That was a busy year for him. This is the Trinity. So here's another example. This is Masolino's, here's a long name, St. Peter healing a cripple and the raising of Tabitha. But once again, right, those white lines aren't originally in the painting. It's to show you that there's a vanishing point, right? That's in the back, this is in the front. Okay, so that also helps it look realistic when you do those sorts of things, right? You cannot avoid math just because it's social studies. Math is in art, right? If you want to be an artist, you got to understand things like geometry. Here's to show you the before. Medieval art, this does not look so realistic. There's not a vanishing point. Some things are big, some things are smaller. I guess this little red house is in the back, but the proportions are just not there. They could have used a geometry lesson, right? Now the third one is Classicism. So when you hear Classicism, think of ancient Greece, think of ancient Rome. So all 3 of these statues are from ancient Greece and Rome. They're Greco-Roman. They're not from the Renaissance. But I want you to show you the before. So what do you see here? Well, they're individuals. They're by themselves. They're somewhat symmetric. They're balanced. They're freestanding. Okay. And then you get medieval statues. And, well, for one thing, there's a lot more clothing. But it focuses more on the spirit instead of the body. There's no abs going on, right? They don't really focus on a torso. The limbs are not as pronounced. They're just sort of held in there. They're not really individuals by themselves. They're with others. And that's an important difference. So we got the before, and now here's the after. So the Renaissance goes back to those classical ideas. See how this looks more like it's from ancient Greece or Rome than medieval times, right? So they were sort of replicating those notions. Sometimes you can't tell if you go to a museum, oh, is that from ancient Greece and Rome, or is that from the Renaissance? Sometimes by the state it's in, you can tell, because of course the other ones are a few hundred years older. So on the left you have Adam by Tullio Lombardo. That was done in 1493, right? You see they did some ab work there. Once again, the focus on the individual, there's some symmetry, balance, all those sorts of things. The next two are from Michelangelo. The middle, the Madonna of Bruges, from 1501 to 1504. You see there, even baby Jesus is a bit exerting his individualism. He's not being cradled by Mary like you would in a lot of the other artwork of the two together. And the other one is also Michelangelo, that was done between 1513 and 1520. That's a statue of a dying slave. So even the slave was getting some acknowledgement as an individual. This was made for the tomb of Pope Julius II, and it's now in the Louvre in case we take a class trip to France. So let's focus more on this idea of individualism. And that's going to be our fourth characteristic, a real emphasis on the individualism. So if you're going to focus on the individual, you're going to make things like portraits. There weren't as many portraits in the medieval time, but it becomes a thing in the Renaissance. Okay, this is like the selfie of the Renaissance. People are like, oh yeah, I want you to see me. We're going to show ourselves off. I am proud. I got my bling on. Look at my fancy pearl necklace. Look at the things in my hair. I'm going to put this up for people to see it, right? Like before the Kardashians were on Instagram with their selfies, the Renaissance people had this idea first. The wealthy, the merchants, the aristocrats, they were doing it. So the Kardashians are not as original as you might think, all right? The Renaissance people had this idea. This is Battista Sforza. She was from a wealthy aristocratic family, and that is her husband, Federico Montefeltro, and he was a wealthy merchant. So that's like a Renaissance match made in heaven. This was painted by Piero della Francesca between 1473 and 1475. So once again, if you had power, if you had money, you were going to commission an artist to take your portrait, preserve your memory forever, right? For hundreds of years later, we're still talking about these two. Here's another example. This is by Raphael. You might notice here he was sort of studying Da Vinci's sort of, it's a little Mona Lisa-ish going on there, right? Look at her hands, look at the background, look at her hair and all that sort of stuff. But this was a young married couple as well. This should say number 5. Number 5 is the geometrical arrangement of figures. So once again, you can't avoid math, all right? Because math is in social studies. Sorry, it's in art. So look here. This is looking at the figure as architecture. We're going to study Da Vinci and how like he went into like places and I'm running out of time and we're only at the 5th one. So I'm going to end with this one and I'll make the next one another video. So the 5th one is geometrical arrangement of figures. Da Vinci opened up bodies to see how the body was constructed. Because just like we're looking at the architecture of skyscrapers in New York City, in order for him to paint it, he wanted to understand how it was made. And you also see how it is like a triangle, right? I'm sorry, I'm sort of getting out of step here because I realize the time's up. But let's look at another example. That's The Last Supper by Da Vinci. This is Raphael. This was between 1504 and 1506. So once again, you see things sort of like in the triangle. Oh, so let's stop here. That's my alarm telling me I've talked too much. The last ones are 6 and 7, light and shadowing and artists and celebrities. We'll probably finish those last two, talk a little bit about Northern art for the next video. And I'll try not to talk so much, but ask me questions in class. This is really fun stuff to learn about. I hope you enjoyed it.